Thank you for joining me for the latest edition of VGR Lockdown. I'm out on the road this week, so please forgive me for if there happens to be any issues with the sound quality this week. I'm checking out a different mic that I can utilize when I'm out on the road and not at home to get you guys that nice, clean recording. So, this past weekend, I want to get into, you had two events. You had the NXT TakeOver and you had Money in the Bank. Just giving you guys a quick review. Awesome events, especially NXT TakeOver. Definitely, as usual, stole the show. So I'm going to get right into things. Hopefully I don't forget anything. Starting NXT TakeOver. Great show. Starts off with the NXT Tag Team titles, the Undisputed Era. I always forget the guys' names that they were fighting. Nonetheless, a great tag team match. It was one hell of a start to NXT TakeOver. Crowd was really into it. Match quality was fantastic. If you haven't seen it, you definitely want to check that out. In the end, it was the Undisputed Era that came out on top. Roderick Strong and Kyle O'Reilly definitely stepped things up. Moving on, you had the NXT Women's title that was defended. Shayna Baszler versus Nikki Cross. Pretty good match. Definitely another good match between the two. Shayna Baszler definitely came out on top there, with Nikki Cross pretty much going out like a badass, getting choked out with a smile on her face. Pretty good match. I'm definitely interested to see where they're going to continue to go with Shayna Baszler as the women's champion. You had Nikki Cross, that was, a different opponent for somebody who wasn't afraid of her and was willing to take the fight to her. Everyone else that they had on the roster, they seem to be running this whole thing where they fear Shayna Baszler and everything else. So I'm definitely just interested in seeing where they go with this story, whether or not they go back with Nikki Cross, especially since they didn't move her up to the main roster with the rest of Sanity, just to keep that women's division strong down there. So definitely looking forward to see where that goes. You also had Ricochet versus the Velveteen Dream. Great match. Definitely back and forth. A lot of one-upsmanship. Velveteen Dream definitely tried to do a lot of moves that Ricochet does, under the anything you can do, I can do better. While it was a great match, it definitely led to some weird visuals in the sense of Velveteen Dream's a pretty tall guy, especially compared to Ricochet. So in an attempt to do some of the moves that Ricochet does, he did it in a fashion that was, it was to the best of his abilities, but it just, some of the moves seemed odd. Certain times he may have needed a second leg up to do the move. So you may have seen like an extra step on the rope to actually get him into the move. So it was a little odd. Nonetheless, fantastic matchup. Definitely worth going back and watching. Ricochet came out on top. Probably the best decision between, who they were going to have win this match. I think Ricochet has a better shot at being NXT champion than Velveteen Dream, which is definitely a shame because Velveteen, he is definitely over. He has a good look, but as I've talked about it before, his gimmick, he doesn't have that top champion gimmick, and that may actually hold him back. And certain times where he would probably should get victories, he might not. But it was definitely even in defeat, he still looked good. I wouldn't mind seeing that match again, actually. And last thing, well, actually, there's 2 more matches left. I'm sorry. You had the NXT Championship, which was Aleister Black versus Lars Sullivan. Pretty good match. They definitely they played it right. The only downside, there was one huge botch in the match, which was more of a mistiming for Aleister Black hitting his finishing move. Did the whole thing, got the loud slap on his leg, but he missed the kick. And he missed the kick by a mile, which would have been fine if Lars Sullivan then didn't have a delayed sell of the move and just abruptly kind of just fell to the ground. But it was long after the kick had happened and he had missed and everything else. So it definitely took a little out of the match. The announcers tried to play it off, saying, "Oh, he didn't get all of it," but it's clear that Aleister Black missed, and he missed by a lot. Other than that, great match. Aleister Black wins in the end. I think I'd like to see these two fight again, despite the fact that the end was a decisive victory. The match was pretty good. So I'd like to see that match again, unless they're going to move into Aleister Black versus Ricochet, or even somebody who was missing from NXT TakeOver, which was EC3. I'm curious on where they move with things next for Aleister Black. Has a great look. It's done pretty good as NXT champion. His matches are good. They just need to definitely work on his mic skills some more. So maybe they'll stick him in there with some guys that can help him further develop those mic skills of his. But last but not least, you had Tommaso Ciampa versus Johnny Gargano in a street fight. Amazing match. Going into this pay-per-view, I definitely wasn't 100% sold on seeing this match yet again. But they surprised me. Each time they fought, they've definitely stepped things up, and this match was amazing. It was definitely a fantastic way to end this almost maybe over a year-long feud between the two. And it ended definitely the way that it needed to end. Just getting towards the end of this match, pretty much they did a spot where Johnny Gargano, I can't remember the name of the move, but pretty much he had Tommaso Ciampa across his back, kind of like the Sheamus's Irish Curse, and he jumped off one of those big sound boxes, and they came crashing through 2 tables, and they did the whole stretcher job for Tommaso Ciampa. And then, of course, throughout this whole feud, definitely some character development here where Johnny Gargano couldn't let it go. Tommaso Ciampa's being stretchered out. He would have won the match and everything. Instead, Johnny Gargano lets his emotions get him the best of him. He continues to attack Tommaso Ciampa to the point where pretty much Tommaso Ciampa ended up actually getting the victory in the match. And it was pretty much it was all Gargano's fault because he just couldn't let it go and got out of the game, despite the fact that the match had never been officially called, still running on. But in the end, it was definitely a much needed win for Tommaso Ciampa, especially moving forward. They couldn't let this thing end with Gargano winning 3 times in a row. So it was definitely needed. If this is the end of this feud, definitely a great way to end it. Hopefully they don't continue, despite the fact that it's been a great feud, and I wouldn't mind necessarily seeing these guys fight again. I think now it's been a year. Let these guys move on to something else. They've done great work with each other, but there are other people on that roster that I'd like to see fight. But overall, great pay-per-view. NXT definitely delivered a great product, despite the fact that it still left out a good portion of their top stars from having matches on the show. No EC3. For the first time, I guess they decided they were going to give Adam Cole a break. Definitely would have loved to see him on the card as well. And yeah, that was pretty much it. If you happen to miss NXT TakeOver, even though you may have just listened to me let you know kind of what happened, all of the matches were still definitely great matches. They're all worth watching. If you just want to see some good matchups, definitely take the time, check it out. And then capping off Father's Day weekend, you had Money in the Bank. And overall, I think it was a decent pay-per-view. Definitely had a couple surprises. Starting off, you had Daniel Bryan fighting Big Cass. In the end, Daniel Bryan won. That was probably definitely the best call for them to make. I'm still, Big Cass still has a long way to go. So, him losing to Daniel Bryan, it doesn't do him any favors in the long run. But I still think that he has a lot more development that he needs to do, character-wise, in-ring ability, and mic work, to be given that victory over Daniel Bryan. I'm hoping that since this is the second time that he's tapped out to Daniel Bryan, that this is it for the feud. They can move on to different things. So here's hoping. In the pre-show, you had the Bludgeon Brothers versus the Goodfellows or the Club, or it was pretty much Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson. I didn't see the match. It happened on the pre-show. I'm not 100% sold on the Bludgeon Brothers as tag team champions, and I'm really kind of disappointed in the direction that they've taken the tag team division on both shows. They moved all of their talent, tag team wise, to SmackDown, and then are currently not really using them. You didn't have the Usos on the card. You kind of had the New Day on the card, but you only had one member. No Sheamus and Cesaro. So it's a big step back, I think, from the high points that the tag team division had over the last year. But in the end, Bludgeon Brothers won a match that, no one actually cared about. I really don't feel like they did enough development of this. And it's one of those things where the Bludgeon Brothers, they got a good look. They're menacing. That's great. But there's nothing else special about them that they've shown or developed to get you actually interested in their matches. Then you had the women's title matches. You had two women's title matches. You had the SmackDown match, which was Carmella versus Asuka. In the end, Asuka failed to win the championship again. Carmella got the victory. It wasn't without some shenanigans. It's kind of weird. It didn't quite make sense. Pretty much, you had the return of James Ellsworth. He happened to hop up on the apron dressed up in Asuka's clothing. Or Asuka-ish clothing. For whatever reason, she was mesmerized by it and everything else. And that was a good enough distraction to let Carmella win. It may have been the best call. It definitely made Carmella look good, but it was a weak way for Asuka to lose that match. I'm hoping that, there's a return to this, and at some point, Asuka ends up winning the women's title, but she may end up in the same situation that, and I'll get into a little bit later, that Nakamura might end up in. And it was pretty much, it's now or never. And right now, the rate that they're going, it may be never for Asuka. Because it seems like as time goes on, that mystique is starting to die down and everything else. So they definitely, if they're going to put the belt on Asuka at any point, they need to get it done, and they need to get it done soon. It's nice to see James Ellsworth come back. It's a nice little callback. It kind of brings Carmella full circle. especially since Ellsworth helped her win the belt, not the belt, but win at Money in the Bank, and then for him to return at Money in the Bank once again to help her successfully win the title, and not defend the title. Definitely great callback. So we'll see where that goes. Over on the Raw side, you had Nia Jax versus Ronda Rousey, and I'm telling you, Nia Jax put in some work on Ronda. She beat her down, and I'm not sure if it's one of those situations where Ronda Rousey still needs to work on her selling or what, but she definitely got put through her paces, and the way that it looked like she was hurting, but she stuck in there, got close, got really, 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 really close to actually winning the women's championship, but unfortunately, Ronda Rousey was unsuccessful at claiming the Raw Women's title, which was probably for the best. I still think that she's entirely too new to get that belt. I think she still needs some more development, so it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. Moving on, in the Raw, or not the Raw, but the women's Money in the Bank match. Pretty good match. In the end, Alexa Bliss comes out with that big victory, making her the second women's Money in the Bank winner. But she wasted absolutely no time in holding on to that Money in the Bank contract. And as I said earlier, Ronda Rousey failed to claim the belt, and that's because when Ronda Rousey had Nia Jax in the armbar, about to claim that belt, Alexa Bliss came in. She cashed in her Money in the Bank contract and defeated Nia Jax for the title. So Alexa Bliss is your new Raw Women's Champion, cashing in her Money in the Bank. Over on SmackDown, you had AJ Styles and Nakamura fighting for what seems to be the bazillionth time. I wasn't really interested in that match, not because I wasn't interested in those two. I just feel like they fought at WrestleMania, they fought at the Greatest Royal Rumble, they fought for free live on SmackDown. So this was about the fourth time that I've seen this match, and it was actually a really good match. Definitely a great way to cap off this feud. The only issue that I had with this match is that AJ Styles won. And I'm a huge AJ Styles fan, but as I was speaking to with Oscar earlier, it's now or never for Nakamura. And this was the now. The fact that they decided to give AJ Styles the victory, I'm not sure where they're going to go with Nakamura, or if Nakamura's chances of ever becoming WWE champion is long and gone. I'm not a big fan of their reasoning to keep the belt on AJ Styles, and because I believe initially, with all the changes they did to Nakamura, that they were going to be running with him. However, I understand. You guys had an announcement on Monday that WWE 2K19, their cover athlete, was being announced. And of course, it's AJ Styles. Now, the last thing, company-wise, that you probably want is the cover athlete for your game losing his belt the night before. So I can understand, but it was now or never for Nakamura. I don't see him ever getting the belt anytime soon, at least not in 2018 anymore. So we're going to see what happens from here. Last match of the night, you had the men's Money in the Bank. Great match. You had Finn Balor, Bobby Roode, Kevin Owens, Braun Strowman, and a couple other people in that match. I can't remember all at the top of my head. In the end, and actually, wait a minute. Let me roll back real quick. You also had Bobby Lashley versus Sami Zayn. Decent match. Ended the way that you expected it to win. Bobby Lashley came out on top. Sami Zayn did get some decent offense. He didn't look terrible. It wasn't a squash match. But it ended the way that it was expected to end. So there's not a whole much more I'm going to really say about that. But back to the men's Money in the Bank match. Great match. Really good match. Of course, they did the standard, typical, we need to take Braun Strowman out, so they ended up burying him under ladders and everything else. Which later on in the match definitely had another good moment where it seems like Finn Balor may have gotten too ahead of himself. He hit Kevin Owens with a coup de grace. And then he went to the outside to get another ladder, and he happened to pull one of the ladders that were on top of Braun Strowman. And as he's walking to the ring, you see Braun Strowman crawl out from under the ladder and grab the one that Finn Balor is holding, hit Balor with that ladder. Then you see him run straight through two guys holding the ladder that were about to ram it into him. Braun Strowman runs straight through it. In the end, Braun Strowman comes out on top. You have the new Monster in the Bank. I got some thoughts on that, and I'm going to get into that on my next podcast. But hey, a great weekend of wrestling. If you haven't checked it out already, go back and watch NXT TakeOver. You can check out the Money in the Bank, but I do highly recommend watching the NXT TakeOver. But hey, thank you for joining me for another edition of VGR Lockdown. I'll catch you guys next week. Make sure, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section. If there's anything you'd like to hear us talk about on the show, leave those there in the comment section, and I'll try to get to those in the next podcast or a future one. But hey, thanks for joining me. See you next time.